Imagine sifting through stacks of tax forms in a dimly lit Boston tavern in 1770. A half-mile from the harbor in 10 minutes, your quills scratching as you grumble over British fees. The American Revolution, famed for fiery battles and bold declarations, was sparked not just by grand ideals, but by mind-numbing paperwork and petty disputes. Far from the drama of Lexington, a mile away in 20 minutes, colonists, like you merchants, farmers, or clerks, faced tedious tax laws and trade rules. That fueled rebellion. What was it like to be driven to revolt by bureaucracy's slow grind? Join us to uncover the dull causes stamps, charters, and court rulings that ignited a nation. Share your thoughts. What's the most tedious rule you've ever faced? Drop a comment to join our curious readers. If this tale of revolutionary boredom intrigues you, hit like and subscribe to keep these stories alive. Step into the mundane world of colonial grievances, feel the weight of endless forms, and discover why the American Revolution's most boring causes were its quiet fire, shaping a nation's fight for freedom. The candlelight flickers in a cramped Boston tavern in 1770, its dim glow casting shadows on the worn wooden table as you, a merchant, farmer, or clerk, pore over a ledger. A half-mile from the harbor in 10 minutes. The air smells of ale and damp wool, the distant hum of ships unloading a mile away in 20 minutes, barely audible over the scratch of your quill. The American Revolution, often painted as a blaze of muskets and ideals, began not with grand gestures, but with the tedious grind of bureaucratic disputes. This opening segment introduces the mundane administrative conflicts, tax enforcement, colonial governance, and petty regulations that sparked rebellion, setting the stage for a revolution born not in battle but in the slow, frustrating churn of paperwork and oversight, where the weight of bureaucracy could lull you into weary defiance. A quiet spark in a world of endless rules. The American colonies, sprawling from Massachusetts to Georgia, were bound by a web of British administrative policies that, while dull, sowed deep resentment. As a merchant, you'd navigate these rules in a counting house a quarter-mile from the docks in 5 minutes. Your ledgers filled with figures dictated by London, 1,000 miles across the sea. The British Crown, seeking to fund wars and govern its empire, imposed regulations that felt like chains, their enforcement a daily irritation. You'd tally duties on goods, your quill pausing as you cursed the red tape. The bureaucracies weighed a constant burden, sleep a fleeting thought as you worked late. The romantic image of colonial freedom clashing with the reality of oversight. The colonies, a chessboard for London's control. Tax enforcement was a primary grievance, its complexity a source of quiet fury. The British, needing revenue after the 7 Years' War, tightened customs duties, their agents swarming ports a half-mile from your shop. As a trader, you'd deal with officials demanding manifests for every barrel of molasses, their stamps and seals a bureaucratic maze. The Customs Service, headquartered 10 miles away in a colonial capital in 5 hours, required forms that took hours to complete, your patience fraying as you complied. You've stood in line, the air thick with ink and sweat, the rules' tediousness fueling anger. Sleep a distant dream as you navigated their demands. The myth of fair governance, undone by the reality of petty control. The colonies, a battleground of paperwork. Colonial governance was another source of friction, its slow machinery grinding against local ambitions. As a clerk in a colonial assembly, a quarter-mile from the governor's mansion in 5 minutes, you'd draft petitions to London, your words pleading for autonomy. The British Crown appointed governors, their authority a mile from your desk, who often overruled local laws, their vetoes a slap to colonial pride. You'd copy charters, your hand cramping, the process a labyrinth of approvals that took months to cross the Atlantic. The bureaucracy's pace maddening, sleep a whisper as you toiled, the romantic tale of self-rule replaced by the reality of distant control, the colonies a stage 4 administrative tug-of-war. The Board of Trade, London's oversight body, was a distant but heavy hand, its directives shaping colonial life. As a farmer, you'd hear of its rulings a half-mile from the village tavern, their policies dictating land grants or trade limits, your crops subject to their whims. The board, 1,000 miles away, issued orders that took weeks to arrive. Their language dense with legal jargon, your patience tested as you passed their meaning. You've read their decrees by candlelight, the ink smudging. The bureaucracy's weight a quiet insult, sleep a temptation as you struggled. The myth of colonial opportunity undone by the reality of oversight. The board's rules a spark that fueled defiance. Customs officials were the face of this bureaucracy, their presence a daily irritation. As a merchant, you'd meet them at the docks, a quarter-mile from your shop. Their demands for duties on tea or cloth a constant hassle. These officials, often corrupt, pocketed fines. Their ledgers a half-mile from the customs house, filled with errors that cost you coin. You've argued with them, your voice rising, the air heavy with salt and tar. Their petty power a source of rage, sleep a distant thought as you fought. The romantic image of free trade shattered by the reality of harassment, the colonies a battleground for bureaucratic control. The Quartering Act of 1765 was a particularly grating policy, its enforcement a bureaucratic nightmare. As a tavern keeper, you'd house British soldiers, their boots tramping a quarter-mile from the barracks, your rooms requisitioned without pay. The act required you to provide food and bedding. The paperwork for reimbursement, a maze of forms sent to a colonial office a mile away. You've fed redcoats, their demands endless. The bureaucracy's red tape, a daily burden, sleep a whisper as you complied. The myth of colonial hospitality undone by the reality of forced service. The act, a spark that kindled resentment. The tavern, a microcosm of colonial frustration. Land disputes, driven by bureaucratic mismanagement, further stoked tensions. As a farmer, you'd claim land a half-mile from the village, only to find your grunt contested by a surveyor's error. Their office 10 miles away in 5 hours. The Crown's land policies, meant to regulate settlement, were a tangle of deeds and boundaries, your claim delayed by months of correspondence. You've pleaded with officials, your hands calloused from ploughing. The bureaucracy's delays a quiet theft, sleep a temptation as you waited. The romantic vision of boundless land replaced by the reality of red tape. The colonies a landscape of contested plots, their disputes a spark for rebellion. The currency crisis, another bureaucratic quagmire, choked colonial economies. As a merchant, you'd trade in a mix of coins and barter, the British banning local paper money, their edicts enforced a mile from your shop. The Currency Act of 1764 required specie, scarce in the colonies, forcing you to haggle over credit. Your ledgers a quarter-mile from the docks a mess of debts. You've counted pennies, the candles flicker, straining your eyes. The bureaucracy's grip a daily struggle, sleep a distant dream as you balanced accounts. The myth of prosperous trade undone by the reality of restriction. The colonies a battlefield of economic control. The administrative distance between the faint glow of dawn seeps into a cramped colonial counting house in 1770. its wooden walls creaking as you, a merchant, farmer, or clerk, hunch over a desk littered with tax forms. A half-mile from Boston's bustling harbor in 10 minutes. The air is thick with the scent of ink and stale ale. The distant clatter of carts a mile away in 20 minutes, a reminder of the trade you navigate. Having faced the tedious bureaucratic disputes of colonial governance, you now grapple with a new layer of frustration: the intricate web of tax laws that choked colonial life. Where the first segment introduced the administrative spark of rebellion, this chapter delves into the dry, maddening details of tax policy's Stamp Act, Sugar Act, and more, whose bureaucratic complexity fueled protests, a relentless grind of paperwork that drove defiance. Its weight, a quiet law toward weary repose amidst the colony's growing unrest. The tax system imposed by Britain was a labyrinth. Its complexity, a daily irritation that pushed colonists toward rebellion. As a merchant, you'd tally duties in your shop, a quarter-mile from the docks in 5 minutes. Each transaction burdened by fees set by London, 1,000 miles across the sea. The British, desperate for revenue after the 7 Years' War, crafted taxes that felt like shackles, their enforcement a tangle of forms and fines. You'd seal documents, your hands stained with ink. The bureaucracy's maze a constant hurdle, sleep a distant thought as you worked late. The romantic image of free enterprise clashing with the reality of taxation, the colonies for Britain's fiscal control. The Stamp Act of 1765 was a particularly grating policy. Its paperwork a spark for unrest. As a printer, you'd stamp every newspaper or legal document, a quarter-mile from your press in 5 minutes. The tax requiring a physical seal purchased from officials a half-mile away in 10 minutes. The act covered everything: wills, deeds, even playing cards, its fees draining your coin. The process a bureaucratic slog. You've affixed stamps, the wax sticking, the air heavy with resentment. The tax's tediousness fueling anger, sleep a whisper as you complied. The myth of fair governance undone by the reality of petty fees. The colonies a battleground of stamped paper. The Sugar Act of 1764 was another bureaucratic burden, its enforcement clogging trade. As a merchant dealing in molasses, a half-mile from the harbor, you'd face customs officers demanding detailed manifests, their ledgers a mile away in a colonial office. The act lowered duties but tightened collection, requiring bonds and certificates. For every barrel, the paperwork taking hours to complete. You've argued with officials, your voice sharp, the dock's salt air mixing with ink. The bureaucracy's grip a daily struggle, sleep a fleeting temptation as you wrote. The romantic tale of prosperous trade replaced by the reality of red tape, the colonies a web of fiscal control. The Townshend Acts of 1767 added more layers, taxing glass, paint, and tea, their administration a nightmare. As a shopkeeper, you'd record each sale a quarter-mile from your storeroom, the tax requiring receipts sent to a customs house a half-mile away. The acts demanded precise accounting, your ledgers a mess of entries, the officials' scrutiny a constant threat of fines. You've tallied goods, the candles flicker straining your eyes. The bureaucracy's weight a quiet insult, sleep a distant dream as you balanced accounts. The myth of colonial wealth undone by the reality of taxation, the colonies a stage for fiscal frustration. Customs enforcement was the tax system's iron fist, its officers a daily thorn in your side. As a trader, you'd meet them at the wharf, a quarter-mile from your shop. Their demands for duties on cloth or wine a bureaucratic ritual, their office a mile away holding your fate. These officials, often corrupt, imposed fines for minor errors, their power a source of rage. You've haggled over forms, the air thick with tar and sweat. The bureaucracy's harassment a spark for defiance. Sleep a whisper as you argued. The romantic image of free markets shattered by the reality of oversight. The colonies a battlefield. Of customs disputes, the tax stamps themselves were a symbol of bureaucratic overreach. Their physical presence a daily reminder of control. As a lawyer, you'd purchase stamps for contracts. A half-mile from the courthouse in 10 minutes. Each one a cost you passed to clients, their resentment echoing yours. The stamps, small but costly, required trips to officials, the process eating hours, your patience fraying. You've affixed them, your hands trembling, the air heavy with ink and frustration. The taxes, tedium, a fuel for protest. Sleep a fleeting thought as you worked. The myth of just laws replaced by the reality of petty control. The colonies. Canvas for stamped resentment. The administrative process for tax compliance was a slog, its delays maddening. As a clerk, you'd file forms with the customs house. A mile from your desk in 20 minutes. The paperwork requiring signatures from officials who were often absent. Each form, from duty declarations to appeals, took days to process. The wait. A test of endurance. You've stood in line, the air damp with sea mist. The bureaucracy's pace a silent taunt, sleep a temptation as you waited. The romantic vision of efficient governance undone by the reality of sluggishness. The colonies a quagmire of administrative delay. Tax protests, born of this paperwork, were a quiet but growing force. Their organization a bureaucratic rebellion. As a tavern keeper, you'd host meetings of the Sons of Liberty, a half-mile from the harbor, their plans scrawled on paper to avoid stamps. Their whispers a defiance of tax laws. You'd pour ale, the air thick with smoke and resolve. The protests a response to the tax's tedium. Sleep a distant dream as you listened. The myth of loyal subjects replaced by the reality of organized dissent. The colonies a stage for quiet. Revolt, their gatherings a spark for broader rebellion. The economic impact of these taxes was subtle but profound, choking colonial growth. As a farmer, you'd sell crops a half-mile from the market. The taxes on goods raising prices, your profits shrinking. The Sugar and Townshend Acts, enforced a mile away, forced you to barter. The lack of coin a daily struggle, your ledgers a quarter-mile from your barn, a mess of debts. You've counted pennies, the dawn's light dim, the bureaucracy's grip a quiet theft. Sleep a whisper as you tallied the romantic tale of prosperity undone by the reality of restriction. The colonies a landscape of economic strain. The cultural significance of these tax disputes was immense, forging a colonial identity rooted in resistance. As a merchant, you'd share grievances in the tavern, a half-mile from the docks. Your tales of customs woes uniting neighbors, their anger a bond. The tax system, a mile from the village, was a common foe. Its paperwork, a challenge that shaped a sense of defiance. You've rallied friends, your voice steady. The bureaucracy's weight, a cultural artifact. Sleep a fleeting rebellion against its toll. The reality of grit over loyalty, a lesson in resilience. The colonies, a crucible of tax-driven revolt. The sensory world of this paperwork was stifling, its monotony a daily grind. The air in your shop, a quarter-mile from the wharf, was heavy with parchment and wax, the scent of ink clinging to your hands, the sound of quills scratching officers' boots, and the creak of chairs a half-mile from the customs house filled your ears, a din that dulled your mind. You felt the rough paper, the candle's heat, the dim light straining your eyes. Sleep a quiet lure as the night deepened, the bureaucracy's sensory weight, a reminder of its tedious truth. The colonies a stage for fiscal drudgery. The fragility of patience was stark, the tax system's demands leaving little room for ease. Sleep was stolen in brief moments, a nap over ledgers or a pause in the tavern, a quarter-mile from the docks. As a clerk, you'd fight exhaustion, your eyes heavy as you wrote, the paperwork's monotony keeping you alert. You felt your head nod, the candle's warmth tempting you, but a customer's call or a ship's horn pulled you back. Sleep a fleeting dream in the tax's grind, the colonies a relentless master, their rules a testament to endurance. The dawn brightens, and you sit in your counting house, the harbor a half-mile away, its bustle a faint hum. The weight of taxes, stamps, duties, forms ignited your defiance, a quiet rebellion born in ledgers and protests. Your life, shaped by fiscal strife, found purpose in resistance, each moment a fight against control, each pause a brush with repose. For now, you linger, the ink drying, the morning softening, your heart bound to the colony's truth, a revolution sparked by paperwork's weight, your endurance a testament to a 1770 reality. The midday sun casts a pale light through the grimy window of a colonial warehouse in 1770, its beams illuminating stacks of crates as you, a merchant, ship captain, or dock workers, sort through manifests. A half-mile from Boston's harbor in 10 minutes. The air is thick with the scent of tar and salt, the distant creak of ships unloading a mile away. In 20 minutes, a faint rhythm against the rustle of papers. Having endured the bureaucratic disputes of colonial governance and the maddening weight of tax paperwork, you now face another layer of frustration. The stifling web of trade regulations that choked colonial commerce, where earlier segments explored administrative oversight and tax-driven protests. This chapter delves into the tedious navigation acts and mercantile restrictions, whose bureaucratic enforcement clogged ports and fueled resentment, a relentless grind of red tape that sparked defiance, its monotony a quiet lure toward weary repose amidst the colony's growing unrest. The Navigation Acts, a series of laws from the 1650s onward, were Britain's tool to control colonial trade. Their complexity, a daily burden. As a merchant, you'd navigate these rules in your warehouse, a quarter-mile from the docks in 5 minutes. Each shipment of tobacco or rum subject to London's dictates, 1,000 miles across the sea. The acts required goods to pass through. British ports, their paperwork a maze of permits and bonds. You'd sign forms, your quill scratching, the bureaucracy's grip a constant hurdle. Sleep a distant thought as you worked late, the romantic image of free trade clashing with the reality of restriction. The colonies a cog in Britain's mercantile machine. The requirement to use British ships was a core frustration, its enforcement a bureaucratic slog. As a ship captain, you'd sail from a port a half-mile from the tavern in 10 minutes. Your vessel inspected by customs officers to ensure it was British-built, their ledgers a mile away in a colonial office. The acts mandated that only British or colonial crews could man your ship. The paperwork for crew lists a tedious task taking hours. You've argued with officials, the air heavy with salt and ink. The regulations wait a daily irritation, sleep a whisper as you complied. The myth of open seas undone by the reality of control. The colonies, a maritime chessboard, the of goods was another layer of red tape, dictating what you could export. As a planter, you'd grow tobacco a half-mile from the village, only to learn it could only be shipped to Britain. The rules enforced by agents a mile away in 20 minutes. The list: sugar, indigo, rice required detailed manifests, each crate needing a customs stamp. The process: eating days. You've tallied barrels, your hands dusty. The bureaucracies pace a quiet insult. Sleep: a temptation as you wrote the romantic tale of colonial wealth, replaced by the reality of restriction. The colonies are market-bound by Britain's will. Customs houses were the nerve centers of this system, their officers a daily thorn. As a merchant, you'd visit the customs house, a quarter-mile from your shop in 5 minutes, to clear goods, the air thick with parchment and wax. The officials' scrutiny a constant threat. A single error in your forms could mean fines or seizure. Their ledgers a half-mile away, holding your fate. You've pleaded over discrepancies, your voice strained. The bureaucracy's harassment a spark for resentment. Sleep a fleeting thought as you argued. The myth of fair trade shattered by the reality of oversight. The colonies a battleground of mercantile control. The bonding process was a bureaucratic nightmare, requiring guarantees for every shipment. As a trader, you'd post bonds for goods a half-mile from the docks. The paperwork ensuring compliance with the acts, the cost draining your coin. The bonds, filed with officials a mile away, took days to process, their delays stalling your trade. You've signed forms, the candles flicker straining your eyes. The bureaucracies wait a daily struggle, sleep a distant dream as you waited. The romantic vision of prosperous commerce undone by the reality of red tape. The colonies a web of fiscal restraint. The restriction on foreign trade was a particularly galling rule, its enforcement a source of rage. As a merchant, you'd long to trade with French or Dutch ports 1,000 miles away, but the acts forbade it, forcing goods through Britain a half-mile from your warehouse in 10 minutes. Customs officers, patrolling a quarter-mile from the docks, seized illicit cargoes, their fines a blow to your profits. You've smuggled goods, the nights cover a risk. The bureaucracy's grip a quiet theft, sleep a whisper as you planned. The myth of open markets replaced by the reality of restriction. The colonies a stage for covert defiance. The paperwork for trade was relentless, each shipment a bureaucratic ordeal. As a clerk, you'd draft manifests in a counting house, a quarter-mile from the wharf in 5 minutes, listing every crate of tea or cloth. The forms requiring seals from officials a mile away. The process, taking hours, demanded precision. A single mistake risking penalties. You've copied documents, your hand cramping. The bureaucracy's pace a silent taunt. Sleep a temptation as you worked. The romantic image of efficient trade undone by the reality of paperwork. The colonies a quagmire of administrative delay. The economic impact of these regulations was profound, stifling colonial growth. As a shopkeeper, you'd sell goods a half-mile from the market, the axe raising prices as duties piled on, your customers grumbling. The restrictions, enforced a mile away, limited your stock, forcing reliance on British imports, your profits shrinking. You've counted coins, the dawn's light dim, the bureaucracy's grip a daily burden, sleep a whisper as you tallied. The romantic tale of colonial prosperity replaced by the reality of constraint. The colonies, a landscape of economic struggle. Smuggling became a quiet rebellion, a response to the trade tangle's chokehold. As a dock worker, you'd load illicit goods under cover of night. A quarter-mile from the customs house, the risk of seizure ever present, the air thick with salt and fear. Smugglers, a half-mile from the tavern, defied the acts. Their trade with foreign ports, a secret kept from officials a mile away. You've carried crates, your heart racing. The bureaucracies wait a spark for defiance, sleep a fleeting thought as you worked. The myth of loyal trade undone by the reality of covert deals. The colonies, a hotbed of quiet revolt. The cultural significance of these trade disputes was immense, forging a colonial identity rooted in resistance. As a merchant, you'd share grievances in the tavern, a half-mile from the docks. Your tales of customs woes uniting neighbors, their anger a bond. The regulations, a mile from the village, were a common foe, their red tape a challenge that shaped a sense of defiance. You've rallied friends, your voice steady. The bureaucracies wait a cultural artifact, sleep a fleeting rebellion against its toll. The reality of grit over loyalty, a lesson in resilience. The colonies, a crucible of trade-driven revolt. The sensory world of this red tape was stifling, its monotony a daily grind. The air in your warehouse, a quarter-mile from the wharf, was heavy with tar and parchment, the scent of wax clinging to your hands. The sound of creaking ships, rustling papers, and officers' boots a half-mile from the customs house filled your ears, a din that dulled your mind. You felt the rough manifests, the candles' heat, the dim lights straining your eyes, sleep a quiet law as the night deepened. The bureaucracies, sensory weight, a reminder of its tedious truth. The colonies, a stage 4 mercantile drudgery. The fragility of patience was stark, the trade regulations demands leaving little room for ease. Sleep was stolen in brief moments, a nap over manifests or a pause in the tavern, a quarter-mile from the docks. As a clerk, you'd fight exhaustion, your eyes heavy as you wrote, the paperwork's monotony keeping you alert. You felt your head nod, the candle's warmth tempting you, but a ship's horn or an officer's call pulled you back. Sleep a fleeting dream in the trade's grind, the colonies a relentless master, their rules a testament to endurance. The midday sun fades, and you stand in the warehouse, the harbor a half-mile away, its bustle a faint hum. The tangle of trade regulations acts, bonds, restrictions ignited your defiance. A quiet rebellion born in manifests and smuggling, your life, shaped by mercantile strife, found purpose in resistance. Each moment a fight against control, each pause a brush with repose. The late afternoon sun filters through the warped glass of a colonial assembly hall in 1770. Its faint light illuminating rows of wooden benches as you, a delegate, scribe, or townsman sit with a quill in hand. A half-mile from Boston's tavern in 10 minutes. The air carries the musty scent of old parchment and candle wax. The distant clatter of market stalls, a mile away in 20 minutes, a quiet hum against the murmur of debate. Having navigated the bureaucratic weight of tax laws and the stifling trade regulations, you now face a new source of frustration, the plodding disputes between colonial assemblies and British governors, where earlier segments explored administrative red tape and mercantile restrictions. This chapter delves into the tedious power struggles over charters, appointments, and local laws, whose bureaucratic clashes fueled resentment, a relentless grind of governance that sparked defiance. Its monotony a quiet lure toward weary repose amidst the colony's growing unrest. Colonial assemblies were the heart of local governance, their meetings a battleground of wills. As a delegate, you'd convene in a hall. A quarter mile from the governor's mansion in 5 minutes, drafting laws for your town, a half mile from the village square. These assemblies, elected by colonists, sought to manage taxes or land. But their authority was curtailed by British governors, appointed by London, 1,000 miles away. You'd propose a road tax, your voice echoing, the governor's veto a constant threat, sleep a distant thought as you debated, the romantic image of self-rule clashing with the reality of oversight. The colonies, a stage for bureaucratic power. Plays. The governor's authority was a daily irritation, their control a bureaucratic leash. As a scribe, you'd record assembly minutes a quarter mile from the hall, your quill noting the governor's rejection of a militia bill, their office. A mile away in 20 minutes holding your fate. Governors, often loyal to the crown, dissolved assemblies or ignored petitions. Their decisions a slap to colonial pride. You've copied their edicts, your hand cramping, the bureaucracy's weight a quiet insult, sleep a whisper as you wrote. The myth of shared governance undone by the reality of control. The colonies a chessboard for British dominance. Charter disputes were a particularly tedious grievance. Their legal intricacies a spark for unrest. As a townsman, you'd rely on your colony's charter, a half mile from the town hall. Its terms granting rights to self-rule, but London's reinterpretations, sent from 1,000 miles away, eroded those privileges. The Crown could revoke charters, requiring petitions that took months to cross the Atlantic. The process a bureaucratic maze. You've read charter clauses by candlelight, the ink smudging, the delays a daily frustration, sleep a temptation as you waited, the romantic tale of colonial autonomy replaced by the reality of legal wrangling. The colonies a battleground of dusty documents. Appointments of officials were another source of friction. Their selection a bureaucratic slight. As a delegate, you'd see governors appoint tax collectors. A quarter mile from your hall, bypassing local candidates for crown loyalists, their offices a mile away. These appointees, often unqualified, enforced rules with arrogance, their power, a thorn in your side. You've argued for local hires, your voice rising, the air heavy with ink and resentment, the bureaucracy's grip a spark for defiance. Sleep a fleeting thought as you protested, the myth of fair appointments undone by the reality of favoritism. The colonies a stage 4 administrative scorn. The process of petitioning London was a slow grind, its delays fueling resentment as a scribe, you'd draft pleas for tax relief, a half mile from the assembly. The documents sent to a colonial agent 10 miles away in 5 hours, then to London, 1,000 miles across the sea. Responses, if they came, took months, their legal jargon a test of patience. You've sealed letters, the wax dripping, the bureaucracy's pace a silent taunt, sleep a whisper as you waited. The romantic vision of imperial justice replaced by the reality of neglect. The colonies a distant outpost of London's rule. The dissolution of assemblies was a blunt tool of control, its use a bureaucratic outrage. As a delegate, you'd face a governor's order to disband. A quarter mile from their mansion, your work on a trade law halted mid-debate. The news spreading to taverns a half mile away. The Crown's justification disloyalty or inefficiency was a pretext, the process leaving you powerless. You've packed your papers, the air thick with frustration. The bureaucracies weight a daily burden, sleep a distant dream as you fumed. The myth of democratic governance undone by the reality of suppression, the colonies a battleground of stifled voices. The salaried disputes for governors were a petty but potent issue. They're funding a bureaucratic tug-of-war. As a townsman, you'd vote in the assembly a half-mile from the square. To withhold the governor's pay, their lavish lifestyle a mile away grating on your thrift. The crown demanded assemblies fund salaries, but your refusal was a quiet rebellion. The paperwork a tangle of budgets and protests. You've tallied votes. The candles flicker, straining your eyes. The bureaucracies grip a spark for defiance, sleep a temptation as you debated. The romantic tale of loyal service replaced by the reality of fiscal resistance. The colonies, a stage 4 economic protest. The legal framework of governance was a maze, its complexity a daily grind. As a scribe, you'd study colonial charters a quarter-mile from the hall. Their clauses dense with terms like proprietary rights. The crown's lawyers 1,000 miles away twisting their meaning. Each law required approval, the process taking months, your patience fraying as you copied texts. You've passed legal jargon, the air heavy with dust. The bureaucracy's pace a quiet insult, sleep a whisper as you worked. The myth of clear laws undone by the reality of obfuscation. The colonies a web of legal restraint. The cultural significance of these disputes was profound, forging a colonial identity rooted in resistance. As a delegate, you'd share grievances in the tavern, a half-mile from the hall. Your tales of vetoes uniting neighbors, their anger a bond. The governance struggles, a mile from the village, were a common foe. Their red tape a challenge that shaped a sense of defiance. You've rallied friends, your voice steady. The bureaucracy's weight, a cultural artifact. Sleep a fleeting rebellion. Against its toll, the reality of grit over loyalty, a lesson in resilience. The colonies a crucible of governance-driven revolt. The sensory world of these disputes was stifling, its monotony a daily grind. The air in the assembly hall, a quarter-mile from the tavern, was heavy with parchment and wax, the scent of ink clinging to your hands. The sound of quills scratching, delegates' murmurs, and the creak of benches a half-mile from the square filled your ears, a din that dulled your mind. You felt the rough paper, the candle's heat, the dim light straining your eyes. Sleep a quiet lure as the night deepened, the bureaucracy's sensory weight a reminder of its tedious truth. The colonies a stage 4 administrative drudgery. The economic impact of governance disputes was subtle but significant, stalling colonial progress. As a townsman, you'd see trade slow, a half-mile from the market, as assembly laws were vetoed. The governor's rules a mile away, raising costs. The lack of local control choked growth, your taxes funding distant wars, your profits shrinking. You've counted coins, the dawn's light dim, the bureaucracy's grip a daily burden. Sleep a whisper as you tallied, the romantic tale of prosperity undone by the reality of constraint. The colonies a landscape of economic struggle. The fragility of patience was stark, the governance disputes demands leaving little room for ease. Sleep was stolen in brief moments, a nap over papers or a pause in the tavern, a quarter-mile from the hall. As a scribe, you'd fight exhaustion, your eyes heavy as you wrote, the debate's monotony keeping you alert. You felt your head nod, the candle's warmth tempting you, but a delegate's call or a governor's edict pulled you back. Sleep a fleeting dream in the governance grind. The colonies a relentless master, their rules a testament to endurance. The afternoon fades, and you stand in the assembly hall, the tavern a half-mile away, its chatter a faint hum. The grumbles of governance vetoes, charters, appointments ignited your defiance. A quiet rebellion born in debates and documents. Your life, shaped by administrative strife, found purpose in resistance. Each moment a fight against control. Each pause a brush with repose. The soft glow of dusk settles over a colonial tavern in 1770. Its flickering candles casting long shadows on the worn wooden tables as you are merchant, farmer, or scribes, set down your quill, a half-mile from Boston's bustling harbor in 10 minutes. The air carries the faint scent of ale and ink, the distant clatter of market carts a mile away in 20 minutes fading into the evening's calm. Having endured the bureaucratic disputes of colonial governance, the oppressive weight of tax, paperwork, the stifling tangle of trade regulations, and the slow grind of assembly clashes, you pause to reflect on the quiet forces that sparked a revolution. Where earlier segments explored administrative oversight, tax-driven protests, mercantile restrictions, and governance disputes, this final chapter delves into how these tedious causes, paperwork, regulations, and petty disputes, nation shaping its identity and modern perceptions, honoring the resilience of those who defied monotony, weaving a legacy where boredom was a catalyst, its weight a subtle law toward weary repose in a world of relentless rules. The legacy of these mundane grievances was profound, forging a colonial identity rooted in defiance rather than submission. As a merchant, you'd gather in the tavern, a quarter-mile from the docks in 5 minutes, sharing tales of customs woes with neighbors. A half-mile from the village square in 10 minutes. The bureaucracy stamps, bonds, vetoes was a common enemy, its tedious demands, uniting colonists across trades and towns, 1,000 miles from London's control. You've rallied friends over mugs of ale, your voice steady in the smoky air. The grind of paperwork, a cultural artifact that bound you together, sleep a fleeting thought as you planned resistance. The romantic image of loyal subjects shattered. By a growing resolve for self-rule, the colonies a crucible where quiet revolt simmered, fueled by the weight of bureaucratic monotony. Economically, the legacy of these tedious causes was transformative, reshaping colonial commerce into a battleground for autonomy. As a trader, you'd faced duties that choked your profits. A half-mile from the market in 10 minutes. The Stamp and Sugar Acts enforced a mile away in 20 minutes, draining your coin with every transaction. These restrictions, born of Britain's fiscal oversight, pushed colonists to smuggle goods and boycott British imports, their defiance creating underground markets that defied London's grip. You've tallied losses in your ledger, the candle's dim light straining your eyes. The bureaucracies weighed a daily burden that sparked economic rebellion. Sleep, a whisper as you balanced accounts late into the night, the myth of imperial prosperity undone by the reality of constraint. The colonies a foundation for a new economic independence forged through resistance to red tape. Politically, the legacy of these disputes was a cornerstone for self-governance, their tedium a catalyst for revolutionary change. As a scribe, you'd drafted petitions in the assembly hall, a quarter-mile from the governor's mansion in 5 minutes. The vetoes and charter disputes, a half-mile away in 10 minutes, igniting demands for local control. These plodding clashes, though dull, birthed assemblies that challenged the Crown's authority, their debates laying the groundwork for a nation's democratic principles. You've copied resolutions with a cramped hand, the air heavy with ink and dust. The bureaucracy's sluggish pace a quiet insult that fueled your resolve. Sleep a temptation as you rode through the night, the romantic tale of imperial unity, replaced by the reality of colonial defiance. The colonies a seedbed for ideals that would shape a new government. The legal legacy of these grievances was subtle but enduring, planting seeds for a justice system rooted in fairness. As a lawyer, you'd argued customs cases in a courthouse, a half-mile from the town square in 10 minutes. The Vice Admiralty Court's biased rulings a mile away in 20 minutes, fueling resentment with every verdict. These tedious legal battles, fought over stamps, seizures, or trade violations, inspired colonists to demand fair trials. Their protests a step toward constitutional protections that would define a nation. You've pleaded cases before stern judges, the air thick with parchment and tension, the bureaucracy's grip a spark for justice that burned quietly. Sleep a distant dream as you prepared arguments. The myth of British legal fairness undone by the reality of colonial demands. The colonies, a stage where legal rebellion took root. Its roots in the monotony of court disputes. Socially, the legacy of these disputes was a unifying force, bridging divides among colonists through shared frustration. As a farmer, you'd joined merchants and clerks in the tavern, a quarter-mile from the market in 5 minutes, to protest duties and vetoes. The governor's edicts a mile away, a common grievance that bound you to others. These tedious battles, taxes, trade, or charters, created a collective identity, turning disparate colonies into a cohesive force against British control. You've marched with neighbors, your boots sinking into the mud. The bureaucracy's weight a bond that transcended class. Sleep a whisper as you rallied under lantern light, the romantic vision of divided colonies replaced by the reality of unity, the colonies a melting pot forged in the crucible of administrative strife. The cultural significance of this tedium was immense, weaving a narrative of resilience that defined the colonial spirit. As a townsman, you'd heard tales of tax protests in the tavern, a half-mile from the village square. The shared frustration over red tape uniting communities, a mile from the customs house in 20 minutes. The bureaucracy's monotony endless. Forms, trade bonds, governor's vetoes became a rallying cry, its weight forging a colonial ethos that valued liberty over loyalty to a distant crown. You've shared stories by the fire, its glow warming your hands, the grind of paperwork, a cultural artifact that shaped a defiant identity. Sleep, a fleeting rebellion against its relentless toll, the reality of grit over submission, a lesson in endurance. The colonies, a tapestry woven from threads of quiet defiance. Intellectually, the legacy of this tedium was a spark for revolutionary thought, its monotony driving new ideas that challenged authority. As a scribe, you'd read pamphlets in the tavern, a half-mile from the assembly hall. Their arguments against taxes and governors a mile away, inspiring thinkers like Thomas Paine or John Adams. The bureaucracy's grindforms, delays, and petty disputes pushed colonists to question the crown's legitimacy. Their writings articulating a philosophy of liberty that would echo through history. You've copied tracts under candlelight, the ink smudging on rough paper. The bureaucracy's pace a quiet fuel for intellectual rebellion, sleep a temptation as you read late into the night. The myth of imperial wisdom undone by the reality of colonial reason. The colonies a cradle for ideas that birthed a revolution. The environmental impact of these disputes was subtle but significant, as bureaucratic restrictions shaped the colonial landscape. As a planter, you'd faced trade limits on crops, a half-mile from your fields in 10 minutes. The navigation acts enforced a mile away, forcing monoculture that altered soil and forests. The paperwork for land grants, sent to London 1,000 miles away, delayed settlement, shaping patterns of colonial expansion with bureaucratic precision. You've cleared fields with calloused hands, the air heavy with earth and sweat. The bureaucracy's grip a quiet force that reshaped the land, sleep a whisper as you toiled under the sun. The romantic tale of boundless frontiers replaced by the reality of controlled growth. The colonies a landscape molded by the weight of red tape. The spiritual dimension of this legacy was profound, as the grind of bureaucracy drove colonists to seek solace in faith. As a merchant, you'd pray in a meeting house, a quarter-mile from the tavern in 5 minutes. The endless forms and vetoes a half-mile away, a test of your spirit. The preacher's words a mile off, offering hope. The tedium of taxes and regulations, enforced by officials 1,000 miles away, pushed you to find strength in divine purpose, your defiance a quiet prayer for justice. You've knelt in the dim light, the air heavy with wax and resolve. The bureaucracy's weight a spiritual challenge, sleep a gentle temptation as faith steadied your heart. The myth of imperial benevolence replaced by the reality of moral resistance. The colonies a sanctuary for souls. Seeking freedom, the administrative legacy of these disputes was a foundation for modern governance, their tedium shaping systems of accountability. As a clerk, you'd filed petitions against governors. A quarter-mile from the assembly hall, their vetoes a half-mile away, inspiring calls for transparent rule. These battles, though dull, laid the groundwork for checks and balances, their paperwork, a precursor to democratic processes that would define a nation. You've sealed letters with trembling hands, the wax dripping in the candle's glow. The bureaucracies pace a quiet catalyst for reform, sleep a fleeting thought as you worked. The myth of imperial efficiency undone by the reality of colonial demands, the colonies a blueprint for accountable governance. The personal legacy of your life was humble yet vital. Your role in this tedium a quiet thread in the fabric of history.